This evening will be on our budget, and so that is what we'll spend our time doing. We're going to start out with our opening items, which begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Oh, Ms. Violet's not here. You're here. Okay. Okay. We need to do a roll call to see if we have a quorum in effect.
Okay. Director Davis Day.
Present.
Vice President Edwards.
Present.
President Milton Roberts.
Present.
Secretary Taylor, not here. Director Pearson.
Present.
Director Humphrey.
Present.
We have a quorum, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. All right. Director Pearson, can you do the honors and do the forward lines for us again?
Maybe I was good to make something, okay. Good evening. We use facts and data to inform our decisions in accordance with the interests of the overall district as a whole and not any particular segment thereof. We would support the delegation of authority of the superintendent in the day-to-day district operations and act in accordance with the 6 governing documents. We support the board decisions. We come to the board meetings prepared and informed. We honor our elected role by being in attendance. We will honor all voices by encouraging individual input and listening to others.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll have the adoption of the agenda.
Board President, I would like to acknowledge Director Christopher Petty's arrival.
We will now do the adoption of the agenda.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we adopt the agenda as written. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's been moved and properly seconded, and it has been voted on, and we are going to adopt the agenda as written. Our items that we're going to deal with first are going to be items for information, and since this is the budget workshop, that means that we're going to be dealing with the budget next. So we're going to look at the, we're going to have some training, and then we're going to look at the fiscal 25-26 budget and have an opportunity to ask questions and so forth. So I'm going to turn it over to our, pull my microphone down, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for letting us know. I'm going to turn it over to our CFO to lead us in this workshop, and Dr. Triplett, feel free to, jump in and so forth as we go along.
Good evening, Joint Executive Governing Board, Dr. Triplett, and Normandy Schools community. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. Wanted to first just kind of mention really what our plan is for this evening with our budget workshop. Traditionally, what we've done in our district, we've really tried to take some time prior as we are working through the budget process to actually, as a part of that process, to gather input, to have discussions around the budget with regard to current issues and perspectives that are going on in the district. And again, also to glean and to gather advice and some even direction from you, the board, that we take back in our process and we incorporate in our budgeting process. And so that's what our goal is today. By the way, we have not finalized, or we really don't have projections. I mean, I'll talk about some numbers. Good evening, sir. But we tonight want to basically sit down and have a discussion with you with regard to key components that will be incorporated in our budgeting process. And so we are going to most likely be needing an additional meeting where we're going to have the budget document before you that fleshes out many of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. And that's a meeting where you're going to have a chance, we'll talk further, and along the way we'll be talking, but you'll have that document in front of you, and we will at that point be asking for subsequent approval and adoption. But tonight we wanted to move forward with this process, which is very important. And I want to, first of all, thank you all for your sacrifice for coming out. I know that you all are all very, very busy people, and you've been doing important things this week and throughout the day, and we appreciate how you have come out and sacrificed additional time for this great school community to walk through this process. I'd like to begin presentations with our district mission statement. Very important, and also our values. Our mission statement says, accordingly, Normandy Schools Collaborative prepares global leaders for college, career, and productive citizenship by empowering a community of confident learners and valuing the unique contributions of every student. And then with regard to our values, those are excellence, dignity, collaboration, tenacity, and care. What we're going to cover this evening, we're going to look at the purpose of this budget workshop. We're going to look at and walk through a 5-year revenue and expenditure and fund balance trends review. We're going to also look at a 5-year board expenditures along with the averages. I know you all had asked for that information. We're going to look at assessed valuation trends. We've got some positive things there. We'll look at a fund balance. We'll have a discussion again about and around what is an appropriate fund balance. We're going to talk about some budget assumptions that we are incorporating in this year's budgeting process. We'll also do a SWOT analysis, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, which is pretty important in this process, and just to really talk about goings on in our community. And finally, we'll field your related questions. Okay?
Before we move on,
Yes.
we wanted to acknowledge that another board member has arrived, Ms. Director Violet Taylor. So welcome.
Welcome. It's great to see that we have a fully loaded board tonight. Again, the purpose of this budget workshop, we want to plan out this important initiative for the upcoming 25-26 academic year. Secondly, we wish to evaluate financial data and trends to facilitate the development of a solid and viable budget. Thirdly, we want to solicit collective input from you, the board, budget administrators, and stakeholders. Fourthly, we want to really rely on and build transparency to provide and discuss insights and concerns during a public forum. And finally, we are complying with Board Policy DB, which states, and we'll see that a little bit later, strategic plan commitment initiatives. These are some of the things that we're going to be incorporating into the budgeting process with regard to our strategic plan. Early childhood education, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness, more resources for student success, governance and accountability, and sixthly, engaging environments. Our strategic priorities that are also going to be incorporated in this process include engaging environments, college-ready teaching and learning, securing top and retaining top talent, impactful partnerships, and then fifthly, 21st century learning organizational procedures. That Board Policy DB that I'd mentioned with regard to the annual budgeting, planning, and adoption process says that the budget, and this is our, again, board policy, budget planning and preparation is a continuing process that must involve individuals who have knowledge of the educational needs of the community and who can provide accurate data about the financial potential of the district. Members of the board, citizens, students, and professionals, professional and support staff members should be involved in the planning process, which culminates in the preparation of the budget document. The superintendent will establish procedures to seek input on budgetary needs from the appropriate people. So now, moving forward, we're going to look at quickly a 5-year financial data and projections analysis. So we see here, this is our 5-year revenue trend. These are results from FY 2020 through FY 2024. Of course, we know what was happening in FY 2020, don't we? We were hit by COVID. That was a massive challenge. As you look at that bottom line with the grand totals, you see we had collected basically and received roughly $53.3 million in revenues that we earned, largely on property tax assessments, also from state foundation formula monies, and then also from our federal programming funds. In 2021, we had a huge jump in our revenues, which moved to $84,891,176. And a reason why we had that huge jump is we had basically a bond referendum that was passed. We had that $26.5 million bond referendum, and we had the proceeds from that bond issue that were deposited that specific year. In 2021, 2022, we saw revenues coming in of roughly $66.7 million. And then in 2022, 23, we had another jump up to $82.6 million. Some of that was we had received bond proceeds. We refinanced or refunded bonds, and that was also an integral part of why that number was high for that specific year. And for the year just ended, or the last fiscal year ended, June 30th, 2024, we had $68 million in receipts that we acquired. The approved budget that you all approved, or that the board approved last June in revenues for this year, is roughly about $62.8 million. I will say we are trending well. We are about $54.7 million is what we've collected year to date through April. So we're coming up on that $62 million, and we're looking at probably projecting receipts coming in well over that $62 million. It may end up closer to like $68 million or so. We'll see how that final number gels out. But you'll see that also in a future our document when we bring the budget before you for consideration. And then you can look at, basically, this is a slide that shows the percentages, the revenues, where they basically are coming from. Roughly 41%, in looking at the actual revenues that came in for 23-24, 41% of our revenues come from local sources. That's largely on property taxes that are billed on our property. So anyone that has commercial property, that has residential property, personal property, or even farm, agricultural property, paying into their taxes into the system. And roughly, just so you know, any community that you live in, roughly about 52% of the taxes that you pay with regard to your property taxes are attached or go to the local school district, public school system that you're living within. So we garner a large chunk of our revenues came from local sources in the form largely of tax receipts on property. And another thing as an aside to know is that we receive the bulk of those monies, those property tax assessments come in December and in January. So you're gonna see something really interesting. This is something to know. You'll see our fund reserve balance. It may, high or max out somewhere maybe around January or February, and then it'll decline over the course of the year. And then it'll jump back up in December when we begin to receive the property tax assessments again. Roughly 1%, a very small amount, comes from the county. That's in the form of fines and what's called, it's a legal term, escheats. We receive roughly 31%, or we did this past year, from state funding. That's in the form of state foundation formula funding, which is largely based on our student enrollment and the average daily attendance. That's why you hear Dr. Triplett really beating, and he does a great job of this, ensuring that we get participation and attendance in our buildings, because we actually receive payment on that enrollment and that actual attendance. So when you hear the 90-90, where we want our buildings to have at least 90% of our children attending 90% of the time, that's a very important thing, because that's actually generating income that we receive in the state foundation formula monies. There's also transportation money in there, Medicaid money in addition to that, et cetera. And then we roughly received about 16% this year from federal funds. That number's down a little bit, but federal funding in the form of Title I, II, III, and IV, those are big funds that we receive. In earlier years, we also received, of course, ESSER funds. That has basically ended. We do have some of that that was received in 23-24 as well. And then we have another category known as other. That's usually when we refinance bonds, that's the category that captures the revenue that we receive, the proceeds, when we are issuing bonds or refinancing bonds. And then our 5-year expenditure results. This is also important information, again, for the 5-year period FY 2020 through FY 2024. You can see, again, following that bottom trend line, you can see in 2019-20, we had expenditures of roughly $59 million. We had actual expenditures in the following year of $57.8 million. That number boosted up to $73.7 million, and some of that largely was we began stringent and really extensive construction. That was a year that we saw extensive construction. And again, we had expenditures at about $73.7 million. The same situation, we had $82.4 million in expenditures for 22-23. Again, another very high construction year. And then the most recently ended year, 23-24, we had $79.137 million in largely in construction cost. A lot of that was in there as well. That Ms. Days, I see that our operations director is in the audience, and her group has been helping us manage that. So you can kind of see roughly that the FY24 increase or decrease over FY23, the expenditures were down roughly about 4% compared with the prior year. And so this year's budget that was approved last June has an expenditures budget of $67.5 million. By the way, this is an aside, and this is an accounting thing for you all to know. This is good information to know. But when anyone ever talks about what is your budget, what they're asking you about, they're not asking about what your revenue budget is. We saw that our revenue budget was like $62 million, but what they're talking about is what is your expenditure budget. So whenever anyone asks, what is your budget? Always keep in mind they're talking about the expenditure side. They're not talking about the revenue side. They're talking about the expenditure side, what you're spending, what you've approved, what your board has approved for spending. So that's something else, a component to know. So our 5-year board expenditures, you, the board, of course, have a budget. You have some important components that you manage directly, and they hit your specific budget. And we've provided you here with a 5-year synopsis of your budget spending. We saw in FY 2021, let me just kind of look at some of the things. These are the line items that make up your budget. Audit services. So our external audit runs through, those expenditures run through your budget as a line item. Attorney fees is a second major expenditure that runs through your budget. Election services, whenever, of course, we are appointing, or, we just have had new board members this year, but we have to go out and, there's work to be done with that, and so we have a budget for that. You can see that in 23-24, we had expenditures of $13,000 and $15,000 in order to make that go properly. We have purchase services. This is to pay for things like board docs, et cetera. You have, fifthly, equipment, equipment lease. So we have the rental of a copier. Now, Ms. Rixby works with that extensively. That's another line item. We have travel and seminars and meetings, and you can see that we have actually increased that cost. If you can see 21 and 22, we had like $5,500 in travel costs and $4,000. We took that number up, and just really being sensitive to knowing you all need training. We took that up to $23,000, $17,000, $16,000, $17,000 in subsequent years. Liability insurance. So you all we run all of the liability insurance through the board budget as well. So that's on our properties. Really, this piece is more directly on the board protection. So the district, as districts sometimes are, we get sued, okay? Just so you know, we've had some suits this year. We've had a lot of falls and injuries and these types of things. And while we've got improvements, we really have come a long way. There still is a liability, and that is actually covered by our music organization, the Missouri United School Insurance Council, that finances and insures us against liability there. We have some small advertising costs periodically that run through your budget. And then we have dues and fees and memberships. Your membership associations like MSBA, MASSA, Ed Plus, et cetera. And then you have a general supplies budget as well. And looking again at that bottom line, again, you had $363,000 in 2021, $364,000 in expenditures. Now, these are the actual spending. These are the final numbers of spending. $364,000 in 2021-22, jumped up to $433,000 in 22-23, dropped a little bit to $395,000 in 23-24. We have expenditures that are up at $495,000 in 24-25, and an approved budget, or the average of that 5-year period of time says that you've got about $410,000 worth of expense that runs through the board budget. And that's most likely what we're going to put in your budget for the upcoming year. We've given you that projection of what we're going to put in for the board budget. If you have some thoughts around that being higher or lower, please advise. Okay, so then expenditures by category. This is basically looking at our numbers, our total expenditures. Roughly, certified salaries make up about 18% of our budget, our spending. Non-certified salaries make up about 14%. And just so you know, we have about 460, anywhere from 420 to 460 employees at any given time. Our benefits package is at 11%. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we've been waiting on an insurance renewal that we're getting. And we have calculated that insurance, while we had a good claims history this year, we are projecting that our benefits cost is going to go up a little bit by as much as 10%. Our purchase services, that makes up about 12% of our expenditure budget. Supplies, that we have, that makes up about 8%. And by the way, if people ask, where is food? When we look at budgets, where is food counted for? And that's actually under supplies. And then we had about 19% of our budget in capital outlay, and then another 18% in other. The other being, that's the payment of interest and principal on our outstanding debt as it becomes due. So our 5-year fund balance results, again for the 5-year period, 2020 through 2024. Again, with fund reserves or fund balances, that's basically looking at our total, the way that that's calculated, by the way, is it's basically your total expenditures, your total savings, okay? So it's really good. This is what we have banked in our savings account. But you take that total savings and then you divide it by the expenditures, the overall expenditures. And so we see in 1920 that our fund reserve was at about 14.38%. It jumped up beginning in 2021 to 25.07. It subsequently jumped up or moved up a little bit more to 26.97. And then the last 2 years, we've actually built it or strengthened it even more. It's at now 34.58% for 22-23, and then up again to 35.82% for 2023-24. We're hovering in around that level right now. That's a strong fund reserve balance, just so you know. Our operating fund balances, as I've talked about, you can see we had a low. I'm showing, you see some years, 2008 through 2011, and then you see 2013 and 14. You see single-digit fund reserves. Now, the state has a mandatory requirement that in our operating funds, which are our teachers fund and our general incidental funds, that we retain at least a 3% minimum fund reserve. If you dip under there, that's when the state can come in and take over. And we see that in 2013-14, we dipped all the way down to 1.49% in our fund reserves. That's scary. That's scary. I think maybe Mr. Humphrey was on the board at that time, so you saw how challenging that was. I think we were, of course, absorbing Wellston School District, and we had other challenges that factored into what took place there. But we began, of course, built back up to the point where we're at, again, the 35.82%. And that's roughly more than 10, 11 times higher than the state minimum. So that's a very strong fund reserve balance. What is an appropriate fund reserve or fund balance? Again, as I mentioned, DESE requires a minimum 3% operating fund reserve balance. Fund balance percentage represents the fund reserves or savings, as I mentioned, in the general and the teachers' funds, divided by the expenditures in the general and the teachers' funds. And then a healthy operating fund balance generally falls between or within a 15 to 20% range, which is 5 times again or above the minimum 3% requirement. Again, we are at that 35% level, which is pretty strong. And then fourthly, we will work to develop and present a budget that meets these guidelines. So that's one of the things that we really want to retain. We will see our fund reserve balance move back down toward 20% again, at 35%, roughly 32% right now. It will move back down, and then it'll boost back up come, say, December, when we start getting the reserves back as we continue to manage our financial position. Our assessed valuation for 2017 to 2023. We had an assessed valuation in 2017 of $270 million in our total residential properties, commercial properties, personal property, and ag property. We actually have some small agricultural property in our district. Isn't that kind of crazy to think that we do have some farming going on in our community? But we were at $270 million in our assessed valuation. Let me give you a comparison. I worked for several years in another district in Ladue. And in Ladue, I had, as the CFO, I had $1.5 to $2 billion in assessed valuation we had to work with, which was massive. We were at $270,000, but the good news is that we have boosted. Our assessed valuation has grown to $422 million as of the last property tax assessment in 2024. That's significant. And what that's doing, that's generating more operating income for us, okay, to address staffing and operating issues. Now I know that homes are more, valued, and for a long time, North County properties were undervalued, just to be honest with you. Being a product growing up in the North County community, my mom still lives in the community, in the home that I grew up in, but those homes were, valued for years too low. And we're happy to see that the county has come through with a more accurate assessment of our property. And so while we're paying more, our constituents are paying more in taxes, it's a good thing for our community, okay? So you see the growth there, $270,000 in 2017, gradually going up. And really, you're talking about a growth over 50 to 60% in just basically that 7 to 8 year period of time. So in looking at the 2025-26 budget assumptions that we're building in this current upcoming budget, we are seeing we're going to have steady, stable growth in overall assessed valuation. So the assessed valuation, by the way, is going up about 2.4% over the prior year. The prior year before that, in a reassessment odd year, we had a 24% jump in assessed valuation. Our enrollment is at approximately 3,000 plus students with overall average daily attendance at approximately 85% for all levels. So our enrollment has been recovering. We're seeing more positive trends there. As I'd mentioned, Dr. Triplett works with the building principals and with all of us to ensure that our students are attending, that, they're in seats and that they're learning. It's a very positive thing. Thirdly, stable federal program revenues projected with a slight decline for the elimination of the Head Start program and a couple of other programs. So we're seeing some things. We see some things. We receive a little bit in Medicaid dollars as well, and we know that may be slightly threatened, but we hear that really on the federal side, we should be okay. We should be largely okay, especially with our Title I and II and III funding and IV. Returning personnel projected to receive a 2.25% increase over prior year levels, with teachers also receiving a $100 increase on their base salary. That's projected in the upcoming budget. Our committee met with the NEA, and we were able to, over the course of a couple of months, nail down really a great plan, 2-year agreement. And let me say this too, normally with the budget process, this budget workshop process, normally we have this like in February or March. We want to ensure going forward that we get back to that. But one of the things that pushed this out was we had the negotiation process this year that we do every 2 years. We finished that, of course, last month, but that's been something that kind of impeded and caused us to push. We were trying to put this on the calendar far back as March, early March, and it kept getting pushed forward. But part of that was with the IBB agreement and that process. So we're seeing some positive things happening here. The second year of the agreement has a 2.5% increase built in to returning personnel with a $100 increase across the board on the base salary for teachers as well. Fifthly, we have projected increases in health insurance rates, and I'd mentioned we're building that in at about 10 to 12%. We actually learned today in communications that we're going to get a credit or a refund because our claims cost are basically this year has been trending better. Our claims have been coming under the projected totals. But still, until we get that final number, we're being conservative and we are building an increase in of approximately 10%. And then completion of ESSER III related projects during 25, 26. And there are a lot of great things going on with that. I'm really proud of our district in many ways. I know we have a lot of growth, and like any district, we have our challenges, but we have a lot of great things going on in our district. And one of those things is just look at what we're sitting in right now. When I first worked for the district 22 years ago, when I came over here, this was U.S. Bank. You know, I had a U.S. Bank account, and this is amazing to see this boardroom. This is a world-class boardroom for a world-class board, and we are happy, you know, to have this. We have additional great things going on in the district. As you know, at the high school, we've pretty much wrapped up the Prop V projects. We are now putting in a new multi-purpose athletic field and a new 8-lane track in the jumps, concession stands. We're making improvements to Viking Hall. That we're going to have the premier athletic complex in all of North County within a year. Outstanding. In addition to that, we've got the electric buses that are on their way, slated to be received later in this calendar year. We've got renovations to the transportation depot at Bell Ridge, and we've got just a lot of great things. These are things that we can see with our eyes, tangible things that are going to promote quality pride in our district, and subsequently more and more quality instruction. So these are some great things around these ESSER projects that we've got going on. I wanted to do a SWOT analysis with you, take our board through a SWOT analysis, looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats underway in the district. With regard to strengths, and of course, I've just identified some. You may have others that come to mind for you. But some of the strengths include solid financial position currently. We've got a rich history. I know Ms. Pearson had mentioned that we talked about that last year. But think about, we celebrated a year ago our 100th anniversary, and just thinking about the great citizens that live in our community and that have come through our schools over the several decades. We have substantial growth in local assessed valuation. I mentioned approximately 26%, and I talked about that a little bit earlier. It's amazing to see the growth that we've had in our assessed valuation in our homes and our properties. We have competent, energetic leaders. Let me say this too. I will say this in passing. I've worked in instruction and education, and I've worked in finance. I've been in the game for over 40 years now. I've worked as a senior, auditor at the federal level and at the state level as a state auditor for many years. I've worked as a CFO or as a finance director, comptroller in 6 districts. I've been a board member in a 7th district. I've made a decision to be dedicated to our district because of the great things that are going on. I've had a district or two that's been trying to kind of get me to leave here and come back and I just let them know I'm not going to do that. I think we're in a good place. We've got a good leadership team. We just have a lot of great things going on, and I'm committed to our district. There's so many good things going on. Yes, we have our things that we need to improve, as anyone does, any school district, but we've got a lot of good things in place, and we want to take the best and to make it better. And I know I'm personally committed to that, and I know many of our other staff are as well. We have strong CSIP and strategic planning evaluation process, a process where we're looking at through MSIP 6 and our CSIP and strategic planning. We're strengthening that. We have healthy tuition reimbursement to attract and retain quality personnel. And by the way, we have the best tuition reimbursement plan by far compared with any other school district in the area. For a long time, Parkway had a really good tuition reimbursement program, but ours is even better. We have new high school facilities and ongoing renovations, as we've mentioned. We have a newly negotiated 2-year NNEA agreement, as we've talked about also. And then we have strong partnerships with regional entities, Beyond Housing, Better Family Life, et cetera. Our weaknesses, and we have those, academic performance, our APR, and we're working on that. We're seeing some growth in that, and we need to take that further, and we will. Provisional accreditation status. Remaining issues around discipline. While there have been improvements there still are some additional improvements to be made. We have a public perception by some. I think that, of course, we've We have perhaps a negative perspective in the eyes of some, but we've got a lot of great things that have been going on and that are turning that perception around. Our workers' comp claims are a little bit high. Those are coming down now, but they're higher than they need to be. And then we have a high poverty level in some of our sectors. Those are some of the weaknesses that we've identified. Opportunities. We have a prospective $35 to $40 million no tax increase bond initiative with operating levy debt service transfer that will also raise approximately $2.5 to $3 million in new operating funds annually. That's an opportunity that's tremendous that is before us. We've been working with our bond underwriter, Stifel Nicholas, Dr. Triplett and I, and we see this great opportunity in front of us to address all of the remaining needs with regard to capital needs throughout the remaining buildings and facilities in the district. We have an opportunity to put this on the ballot as early as next spring, and we really want to make sure that we earn the right to do so. Yes, we know that we have additional improvements to be made around instruction, et cetera, but this is a great opportunity. You've heard me say this before, being kind of an old school kind of guy, remembering the old Motorola commercials, Quasar, that said that the quality goes in before the name goes on. Mm-hmm. I'm a believer in that, you have to really build. You build it and they'll come, we build this, we're building better facilities, safer facilities, et cetera. And that's building net worth and belief in our district again. And I'm so proud of the things that we've got going on. But that's going to be, and there's going to be more discussion to come on that. In addition to that, what happens too, we'll be able to transfer a portion of our debt service levy over to the operating side that will allow us again to generate new money, operating money of about $2.5 million that we can maybe pour into other needs, better instruction, the teachers, strengthening our teachers' salary schedules, et cetera. Secondly, additional options to partner with UMSL and other regional universities, including the Grow Your Own teacher opportunities. Growth in English language learning in the student population. Now, we've actually, that number has actually jumped over 200 students now. Now, of course, we've got some of the things, deportation issues going on with our current administration, but we still are seeing an influx in our ELL students. And we have special needs and requirements that we've got to ensure that those students are learning well. We have opportunities for more advanced placement offerings. The STEAM concept and its implementation, music, performing arts, and athletic opportunities. We want, of course, ensure that those are incorporated more and more in our programming. Opportunities to build and strengthen alumni connections, establish the Hall of Fame. We've been talking about that, et cetera. The e-bus initiative that we've talked about with the EPA. And again, we've got the 15 buses on slate. We're excited about that. We have the routes laid out for that. And again, the transportation depot is currently, underway and getting constructed. And then finally, potential status as a destination district with continued improvement and enhancements. Now, let me say this to that. I think we can dream. And when we dream about our district, we dream of our district being a destination district, a district where people want to come. They want their children to be here and to learn and to grow with us because they see the great potential and the great things that are going on in our district. That's being a destination district. So that's one of our goals. And then threats. Open enrollment. Of course, we know Senate Bill 1010 and House Bill 1757 and its impact. So we're fighting that. Not just us, but statewide, all 560 public school systems in the state, are challenged by that. Some of those are charter schools, but, we don't want to be losing. We don't want to go that direction. Slight loss of local funding due to senior citizen exemptions in St. Louis County. So there's some slight loss, but not much. It's just in the thousands. Potential for declining enrollment. There is always that possibility. And let me mention this with North County. We have a lot of what we call our students in transition or homeless students that basically float, and sometimes it's hard to predict. We've got students that are moving from St. Louis Public, Riverview, Hazelwood, Ferg Floor, Jennings, our great district, Normandy, and, there's just a movement. And at any given time, we can have hundreds of these students that are in these challenging situations that are homeless students that really need our services and need, the wraparound services and the things that we do for them so that they can learn effectively and successfully. We have the loss, of course, of federal stimulus funding. Of course, we've made provisions for that, and we've been working that off of our books or setting that aside and doing what we need to do with it. We've got competition for teachers, bus drivers, and other personnel, and we're challenged by that. We look at the bus drivers, we're seeing that bus drivers are being paid by some. They're trying to pay bus drivers as much as $28 to $30. We've been paying kind of in the low 20s. How are we going to solve that problem? That's a major, consideration. And then finally, potential deportation threats to some of our Hispanic international students is a threat. I have some school finance terminology I've included in your packets, a grid that shows basically a lot of definitions. We had that last year and we've added to it. These are some of those things and definitions that are presented or provided in the document. And now at this time, we are ready to entertain any questions that you might have.
Good evening. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. As I listened to the presentation, there was a couple of places where you talked about revenue versus expenses. And if my math is correct, we were approximately $5,300,000 over revenue. Talk to me a little bit about the checks and balances that'll be in place to try to level that out some.
Okay, sure. So Mr. Humphrey is right on about that. We had revenue projections of about $62.5 million in an approved revenue budget. Our expenditure budget was about $67, so it's roughly about a $5 million shortfall. So what we had agreed to do was to eat into some of our fund reserves to address important needs that were going on or that have been going on this academic year. Now what we've done, to answer your question, Mr. Humphrey, what we do is we actually meticulously look every month at our spending. We provided you, even the board, with, we now have and you get this every month, a financial packet. So you can see in that all of the spending. We have a check register that shows every single check item that has been, purchased. In addition to that, we have the credit card. So those are the two, of course, ways that we buy in the district. And we have all of the transactions that are itemized and that are listed in that document. We work with the building principals and all buyers, all of the budget administrators to ensure that they are spending and staying within their spending. And then one thing that we start doing is in April, we wind down. We have a wind down price process where we begin working, of course, with the superintendent and all of our budget administrators. We start cutting down spending, where we don't allow, come basically mid-May, we don't allow any additional spending unless it's justified. There's a rationale that itemizes or that tells us exactly why the expense is needed. If it's summer school related, for the summer school programming, we allow that. Or if there are some summer projects or some expedient need, we're just shutting the spending down. So we start winding spending down again come April. And that is helping us to strengthen our financial position. And we, again, are looking at every month our expenses. We have, we're calling, I know my staff in the business office works with all of the buildings, the building secretaries and the principals, as do I, to make sure that anything that's purchased is needed. We also do the same thing around personnel, okay? So we ensure that all of our staffing is needed and necessary. And so these are some of the things, in answering your question, that we do to make sure that we are managing our expenditures.
Just kind of as a follow-up, I think one of the other things we need to look at, not necessarily tonight, because it's going to take a little time to look at it, but I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about the checks and balances that are in place around the use of Amazon accounts, because I know that I see that quite a bit, and I just need to understand, as we're trying to understand and manage how dollars are flowing, at some future point, if you could come back and just share with us what that process looks like.
I sure will. Very important. Thank you for that question.
Good evening, Mr. Brooks. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Ms. Pearson.
I only have one question. For the board budget, there is advertising. So I was wondering, what type of advertising does the board exactly have that would require a budget?
Yeah, great question. As you saw, there was a very small amount of advertising that went in. That was something, I guess, with regard to some pamphlets, something around the board, but very small. I think it was $500. I can get you more specifics on exactly what that transaction was, but it was like one time, you know.
Oh, okay.
So we do have we have a line item in the budget for you if you all want advertising. It's seldom used. Again, we had that one like transaction or whatever, but that is something that, you know, you have a line item and you actually have a small budget for it. But, you know, if the board is going out, really for elections and all, that may have been part of it, some type of advertising. But really, we have a communications group. Chris Trahan and his group, they do a great job. So we really do a lot of things internally. There's not really a need for us to go out to really get advertising dollars or do things. We do those things internally largely. But, you know, there have been some small dollars spent at one time on the outside. And I think that was around the election process.
And usually, Director Pearson, what happens is before we set the projections, we'll probably have a conversation with President Milton Roberts to just kind of have some conversations about what our line items for the board looks like so that we can assign monies to those line items. Usually that's what happens. Boards say we want this and this amount of money on this line item. We want this line item instead of that line item, and it's created that way. These line items are not created by us. They're created by the collaboration between NSC and the governing board.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to kind of ask a question off of what Director Humphrey asked about the staffing. Are there any areas within the school district where it could be maybe overstaffing? Say you have someone in a position, because I've heard that there are, I guess, like coaches for some of the different staff in here. So is that something that could be looked into?
Well, thank you,
Or is it
Director Taylor.
necessary? Yeah, is
we
it really
do.
necessary?
We do look at, you know, all of our staffing levels. To be honest with you, I feel that we are lean, to be honest with you. I think that we run a lean ship with regard to staffing. All staffing positions have to be approved. They go through a meticulous process. I sign off, we review them, and ultimately Dr. Triplett signs off on those. But, you know, all of the buildings, say principals have to show a need, you know, but we really, you know, really, I don't think we're overstaffed. With regard to the coaches side, we actually are looking at, one of the things that we're looking at is we want to strengthen our stipend, our coaches and sponsors stipend schedule. We want to make that more competitive. So really on the stipend side for coaches, we feel that we're kind of challenged a little bit, and we feel like we're shortchanged a little bit on the number of coaches that we have. So I don't think that that's an issue. I don't know if you're talking about instructional coaches with regard.
That's what I was getting at. I was
Okay.
getting ready to make an interjection. Are we speaking about athletic coaches
No, I'm
or
talking about
instructional coaches?
coaches.
Okay, so that's a
Instructional
different
coaches.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, the district had somewhere between 20 and 25 coaches. And at some point in time, they had to call those coaches due to low numbers, staff numbers, had to call those coaches back into the classrooms, which created a hardship for the district because now we had nobody to help coach teachers and coach principals around professional learning communities and those things. So once we had a conversation with CNI and other building administrators, and we lowered those numbers to really 5 to 6 solid coaches who assist in all of our buildings. So we are fully staffed. We have 5 or 6 ELA coaches and math coaches. So we're fully staffed. Is that appropriate? I think it's appropriate. Do we have some specialty needs? Absolutely, and we're looking into that too.
Okay. Because when you made mention of that, that was one of the questions, the concerns that I had. Also, I believe last year and the year prior to that, you gave us a listing of the purchasing as far as what's done. I guess my concern, I don't know if this is something that I need to ask here or that I need to ask you, is regarding the food services. That's what my question is concerning the food services, as far as the meals that are being served or the children being served, healthy meals. That's something that I'm concerned about, and I didn't see it when I was looking at it. I didn't see anything that pertained to the purchasing of that. And would it be a greater cost? Because if I remember correctly, when you first came on, he had mentioned about serving hot, healthy meals to the students. And I don't think that that's being done now. So that's, for me, that's one of the things that I'm kind of concerned about. So I don't know if that's if that's something that needs to be discussed tonight, but I just wanted to bring it to your
Yes,
attention.
and we can discuss that at a later date, but I can assure you there are healthy meals being made at the school level, in the kitchens. And additionally, so that you all know, food service is one of those expenditures that are reimbursable. So we spend money, we also get that money back in return. But our food service personnel has made it a priority to make sure we're serving healthy meals, and they do prepare those meals in kitchen.
Okay. Also, do the meals, are they prepared? Because I remember when my children and my grandchildren were in grade school, they would send you a calendar for the month, and it listed what the meals were going to be. I know in high school they don't do that. And so are they serving, I guess I can ask you, Superintendent, are they serving like fruits and vegetables in
Yes,
the
they
high
are.
schools? They are.
They
Okay.
have to take vegetables and fruit and a milk.
Okay.
Every student has to take one. Whether they drink it or not is another question, but or eat it is another question. But they have to take it, and those food service workers make sure that they take those appropriate items.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will say too, Director Taylor, one of the things that we have going on is that we'll have the food service director who has a heart, compassionate heart, that really is concerned about healthy meals for our students. She'll come to, we have, it's actually a superintendent student advisory committee meeting. We meet every month, but sometimes the director will come and listen to and entertain questions from that group of students around the food servings, the healthiness and the quality of the, so we've got a lot of positive things that are going on.
Okay.
We do have a grant for the fruits and we have a specific funding. Dr. Triplett kind of mentioned this, but we are a CEP district, a community engagement program district. All of our students eat free breakfast and lunch. We have to provide that. And we have stringent requirements to ensure that those students are getting healthy meals.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome.
I'm going to look to this end down here. Deanna, do you have a question? We're still getting used to these microphones, so bear with us.
Start from the top and pull your hand down like you stroking it.
There we go.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I have a few questions. I'll try to be briefer. So during your strength presentation, I don't see any academic strengths. I don't see any notes about that we've improved anything. I don't see any bragging on, not even,
Great question. Let's look at that. Let me back up here.
Actually, can I kind of piggyback on her question? What I heard you say at the very beginning was that you wanted to work with us on the SWOT analysis, because as I was going through it, I was making notes as well, because I think there are some things that we don't have called out, and there are some things that we're missing. So is that something that we should do as a group, or what is the appropriate way to do that? Because I think there's some things that have been overlooked.
Well, he did make mention that other SWOT analysis would look different than his. He did make that mention, and it would look different if a CNI person did the SWOT analysis versus a CFO versus a student support. So yeah, I think I think that further conversation that needs to happen with regards to a SWOT analysis being done for like a CSIP that kind of, I think that what you're saying is absolutely spot on when we start looking at a SWOT analysis from that standpoint, but it may not get as detailed.
Right.
In his
I would
report.
agree, I would agree. There's just some things, I'm kind of on the same tip as Deanna. There were some things that were omitted, but there are also some things that I just don't know that we've thought about them. And they're not necessarily academic even in some cases. I mean, if we're investing the money that we invested in the multipurpose field and the theater, and we have a garden and an administration building, what are we doing to utilize those items as profit centers? Okay, because then that's money that could be used for academics and so forth. We have a chess team that's a world-class chess team. That's a strength. Where is that, and how are we building on that? Okay.
Yes.
So I think that if we're planning a budget, we need to focus on all of those things. I think it's kind of one-sided to just focus on the financial things and not to focus on the things that are about the business that we're here to do, which is educating children.
Yeah, but I think those are two different SWOT analysis. What is the point I'm getting at?
No, I get that.
So
but I'm just-
his won't hit all of those points like a CSIP.
I'm agreeing.
Oh, okay.
I'm agreeing. What I'm saying is that as we're planning the budget, okay, the budget is for the district, and the district includes curriculum and instruction, as well as financial aspects, as well as.
But it's an umbrella. His is an umbrella. Ours will be more.
No, I'm following you.
Okay.
What I'm saying is we're creating a budget. He's created a SWOT analysis that has a financial overview. My question is, when do we create the SWOT analysis that has the district overview? Because you can't build the budget without the district overview. That's my question. I get that. Okay, so we need
Thank
to
you.
figure that out.
Yes.
Yeah, we have that figured out.
Yeah, okay. When?
Can we
Again,
go back to?
Yes, let's go back to
Dr.
Deanna's
Triplett
question.
mentioned, the SWOT analysis, again, isn't exhaustive.
Yeah.
The things that you mentioned are right, spot on, and would be included. As he had mentioned, if we were looking at the instructional side more closely, those things would be incorporated. But I was just trying to identify some
Yeah,
key
no,
things.
And you got some
Yeah.
good ones. Deanna, go back to your
Okay,
point about
thank you.
academics.
I agree with everything that you said. So, my concern is that you mentioned it, you mentioned academic performance as a weakness, but didn't address it as a strength. So that was a question. Also, you mentioned that the community, but didn't mention the community or parents as a strength. So, yeah, do we not have a budget that helps or that supports community engagement or parents? Because that would be a strength for me.
Sure, we do. And we do have a budget. We have personnel that work with our community to strengthen the relationships. I mentioned the partnerships. That's part of that process.
My question specifically is for parents. And like you said, taxpayers. Taxpayers pay a large percentage of this circle that you just mentioned. So are we engaging with them? Because I only see a few of them, but when I'm in the community, they're very hands-on and involved. So that's why I'm asking.
Sure. Very
asking
good
how to grow
questions.
that.
I will say, I know the efforts that we've been putting in to reaching our community more effectively. We've got more work to do, but a lot is going on. And a lot will continue to go on as we put aside resources, personnel, and other resources to solicit, parent involvement, et cetera, and stakeholder involvement. We are, putting a lot of resources toward that end. So that's a two-sided, is with any relationship, that's a two-sided component where we continue and we need to continue to do our part. And yet at the same time, there needs to be a response from the community, and we want that. I will say this, and this is just kind of a dynamic that's very interesting, but having worked in 6 districts, some wealthy, some maybe not so wealthy, one of the dynamics that you see in North County, is the participation. This is an ongoing challenge, not just for Normandy. Working in districts, other districts like Riverview and Ferguson Florissant, and working in other districts, it this is a challenge that we need to take to heart and we can be victorious over. I've been in other districts where it was just, I could put together a committee and I had all kinds of board members. I mean, there are all kinds of community people, parents involved. Even building PTOs and these types of things, much easier. And so we just have to continue to do a better job of more engagement. But there is a lot going on. But this is a challenge, not just for our community. This is a challenge that you see often in urban communities. In North, having worked in these districts and been in both types of communities, this is a challenge that is not peculiar just to Normandy.
And I think that a couple of things are happening here, right? Budget work. This is a budget workshop, and I think the questions are absolutely great questions. But I think the venue for it may not be the right venue because he may not be the right person to talk about strategies around some of the things. And so I would just say to the board, if we could stick with the workshop, the budget workshop, not so much as the strategies behind pieces in there, like parenting and what are we doing to increase engagement, those kinds of things. Those are strategies that he probably wouldn't know.
Right. I don't think we're asking you for the strategies, but I think you just helped, for instance, with the SWOT analysis, because you just called out something that's an opportunity that we need to make sure that we are budgeting accordingly from a staffing standpoint and from a material standpoint, that we are engaging our parents and our community.
Yes.
Okay? And so that's exactly what you kind of just proved my point, okay? That there's these things that we need to make sure that we're talking about because they need to be incorporated into the budget. And so we have to create that space before we do the budget, okay, to make sure those things are talked about and known. Because otherwise, we're going to continue the cycle of that being missed, okay? It's not about our partners having an engagement. It's about us, Normandy Schools Collaborative, having an engagement with our community, with our students, and with our families and our businesses. And so we got to figure out what does that look like, okay? And if there needs to be a line item budget-wise, we need to put that in here.
And if I could also share this as a backdrop, I know that today I had an opportunity to get a communication from the president, and one of the things that she's asking us to do is to address looking at how we do the work differently. And part of the conversation is that over the coming weeks, we have a plan. We're going to begin to start building out a plan to have at least 3 retreats for the board during the year, something at the beginning of the year, something in the middle of the year, and something at the end of the year. And I think once we flesh those things out, it'll give us those spaces to kind of have the kind of conversations that we're indicating that we want to have. So everybody stay tuned. We're trying to carve out something, but I at least wanted to give you a very, very high level look at the direction that we're going in, because there's other things we could talk about. There's staffing issues, just based on data and things that we've seen. So if I could, one of the things, Dr. Triplett, I know that we'll probably be having some staffing conversations, but I know one of the things that was concerned to me, we were looking at data around discipline, and in particular, the challenging area was around middle school bus behavior. And so at some point, we need to look at, what does it have to do with budget? It has to do with staffing, whether or not we're putting people in place to help manage that. Because if in fact middle school bus behavior is an issue, the question is, do we need to look at staffing that in any way? Because the bus driver can only drive. They can't always see behind them to address what's happening on the buses. And I'm specifically talking about middle school buses because that was the data that was brought to us where there was a challenge. So where there's a challenge, we need to make sure that we're properly staffed in that area. And whatever that looks like is what it's going to look like. We just need to be able to work as best we can to reduce those challenges. I understand that, and here's what I understand about budgets. Depending on what we talk about, there's a process called stop-start. Depending on what you decide to do, some things will be started, other things will be stopped based on what the needs are. So I'll stop right there because I know there's other things other people may have questions around, but we have to look at how we operationalize
Yeah.
what we're doing because in my world, all a budget is the organization's vision in a numerical form.
That's it.
So the question is, what is our vision and how is it being represented in our budget?
Right.
I'll stop there.
Deanna, were you finished?
I am not.
Okay, thank you. That's why I was like, we kind of just took over, so let me go back
So
to
we
you.
can, I guess I'll go to the budget. So I had a question around, why the budget for the board jumped. And specifically the audit. I believe it's the audit line that's jumping, right?
Yeah, the audit line and the insurance line, I think it was.
Okay, so I can understand the insurance. You're saying that insurance claims are going up, is what you just said. But
yes, that's correct.
the
And we-
audit line and the dues, fees, memberships, that line is jumping as well. Yeah. Right? Okay.
Yes, so are you asking me a question on why the increase?
Right.
Okay, yeah, so a couple of things. I mean, the cost of auditing services has increased to some extent. And we had really for like the prior year, shortly after I came in, the audit process had begun, but it was very difficult for us to get that audit wrapped up. There was a lot of work. We had to work with in our buildings with information and data and working with the auditor. And so that cost was a little bit high. In addition to that, we have had some pieces.
What year did you come in?
I came in, it'll be 2 years and a few more months. So I came in August of 2023.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, you can continue.
You mean, okay. So again, the cost of auditing services, that has been an issue. We've dialed that back a little bit where the expense is a little bit low, it's less now. The cost of insurance, we have had a couple of things that have been happening with regard to our workers' comp claims. History has really kind of grown. It's now coming down some, but that was a dynamic that has contributed to some of the high insurance cost. So those are answers to your specific questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And also, as board members go and receive training, there are costs associated with that as well. So that's in there too.
Let me ask another question, and on this relates to workman's comp and so forth. Are we actively managing safety and accidents and stuff like that as it relates to training and what we're doing with our employees?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We're doing an extensive amount there. We've been bringing in representatives from Gallagher Bassett, our insurance company, music. I know Ms. Days' group has been working and training all of our operations personnel. We've been isolating areas where we've had these accidents. Dr. Triplett has actually committed a resource. We have a person who serves as both our benefits coordinator in addition to like our workers' comp representative, and she's dedicated. So we have resources. I'm also engaged in this process extensively. So we're working with the insurance companies and with our personnel. We're doing other things. It's amazing, but even with cameras, and we're refuting some of these cases that are coming forward.
Yeah.
We have some slips and things that don't look really like slips. They look more deliberate. We're contesting some of those things, and we're winning.
And so a lot of that stuff, I'm sorry to interject, but a lot of we have a lot of old cases. We don't have a lot of new cases. So a lot of this money is they're dedicated to old cases, 2 and 3 and 4 year old cases, and so we're seeing a lot of that, and hopefully the end of a lot of that. So with these new cases, there's a whole different. It's not as much. Okay. It's not as much as past.
Okay, thank you. Deanna?
I'm finished. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Dr. Brooks, how you doing?
I'm fine, Dr. Petty.
Thank you for your presentation. Before I go into my questions, I just want to piggyback off of the question that our president, Cheryl Milton Roberts, just raised. I think that it is extremely important as it relates to workman's comp cases and things like that, that the vector trainings and things should happen early in the school year, and they should not be happening around November and December. I know there was some discussion in prior board meetings about if and when those trainings were happening, but we know that it's an industry standard practice for those trainings to happen typically before the school year starts and before the opportunities are there for people to slip and fall. So I just wanted to just respond to that as part of your question. My question would be, you know, as the superintendent has suggested, getting back to the budget, when you think about the financial turmoil that so many institutions find themselves in today, it's been widely reported in the news media. You think about the financial turmoil, and these organizations seem to be caught off guard by their financial situations and budget shortfalls. Not only are they caught off guard, but in a situation like a school board and the CFO situation, if you're caught off guard, then we're caught off guard. And so I'm wondering, what safeguards are you putting in place to ensure that we don't find ourselves in a situation where the operating fund balance or the general fund balance is not what it should be and we're all caught off guard? And I do understand that Director Humphrey raised this question, but I want to be clear about the safeguards that you're putting in place, and I'm quite comfortable that if you don't answer that tonight at some point, we're open to hearing answers around that question.
Sure. Great question, Dr. Petty. I will say this to that right now. We've got internal controls that we've put around processes. One of the biggest things that, of course, with a budget that you're building is looking at the staffing model. I mean, roughly 70 to 80% of a budget is made up of compensation to returning to personnel. So we look meticulously at, our staffing. We look at, of course, so we're looking to ensure that staffing is not overpriced, is not, that it's appropriate, and that cost is managed properly. We look at that in addition, we look at that in tandem with the revenues that we've got coming in. We want to make sure that we've got sufficient revenues to cover those costs. So we want to make sure that the staffing cost, we've got a good handle on that and those costs. And then we, of course, want to ensure that we've got the revenues and the reserves in place to cover those. And of course, staffing costs are ongoing. So you don't just have to look at that in the current year. You've got to look at future years and periods. So we look at all of those types of things, and we put internal controls around those processes so that we're not caught off guard. And as you've put it, you're not, as the board, our board, caught off guard.
And Director, Dr. Petty, if we do, Mr. Brooks presents to the board financial every month. If there anything particular that the board wants us to focus on, please let us know, and we'll make sure we communicate that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for those responses. And so, just for the record, you don't anticipate any surprises. Our fund balances, both general and operating fund balances, should remain strong given the outlook in terms of the real estate values, the property tax values, personal property tax values, and such.
Yes.
All right. So, in that same vein, what strikes me as odd is that when these financial deficits are being reported, no one seems to be held accountable for it. And what happens, I mean, you can research it for yourself. I'm sure you're probably already aware of it. You have a CFO in organization A and financial turmoil erupts. That person just simply moves on to another organization. And lo and behold, financial turmoil erupts in that organization. And so my question then becomes, should we get caught off guard? Should we be surprised? Who are we holding accountable? Is that you or is that the superintendent?
Yeah, I think actually, to be honest with you, that's a great question. But really, It would be
all
both,
of us.
but
It's
guess
all
who?
of
Guess who
us.
else? It'd be you, the board.
It should
All
be.
of
It should
us.
be
It should be
everybody.
all
in
of
here.
us.
It
We
should
should
be
all
All of us.
be
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. I agree
accountable.
with you.
Because
you know.
and here's the thing, Dr. Petty.
But you get my
And you-
point.
I
Nobody,
get you. And you're
nobody's being held
and
accountable.
I was with you while you were talking.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, and I know you are.
Yeah.
But it behooves us. That's why I have conversations with the district. We make no big financial moves. We make no hiring. We do none of that without blessings from the board. That's why Mr. Brooks is always transparent about every dollar. That's why the board has the right to question every check. That's why he presents every month to make sure that the board see what we see. And so that if there's anything in the public, you're not caught off guard, we're not caught off guard because you know what we know. And so we'll keep it going in that direction. And again, if there's anything the board say, okay, we want to see more of this, we want you to present on that, we'll be more than happy to do that because transparency is how you keep out of that mess.
Absolutely. And so I raise those questions because it's my goal to encourage each and every one of us not to lay the blame at one individual's feet, but to encourage us to get comfortable with the dialogue of exchanging opposing ideas and conversations and raising questions, challenging positions so that we can all together ensure that we get this thing right. So that's my point in raising those questions. Then my final question would be, speaking specifically to the no tax increase bond issue. I'm thinking about the practice and really a philosophy of first having well-identified needs and identified expenditures that have been vetted, that have had the discussion. I think this is the question that our president, Milton Roberts, was getting at, that the superintendent said may not be for tonight. And so I'm not gonna go into it because it may not be for tonight. But what is for tonight is when you talk about a no tax increase bond issue, it could be perceived that we're putting the cart before the horse because we're just going to get the money. Maybe we need to think about what we need, what the district needs, what parents need to be engaged. Maybe we need to think about paying bus drivers $30 an hour. Maybe we need to think about, spending money on social workers or whatever it is. We need to look at those instructional coaches that Violet Taylor, Director Taylor, brought up. And we need to look at it in a strategic manner. It's not just about having instructional coaches in place. It's about those instructional coaches having either a cohort of teachers that they're working with or a caseload of students that they're working with. Therefore, we can track their effectiveness based upon the performance of those entrusted to their care. And so when we think about a bond issue, I'm encouraging the board and I know a lot of this isn't your role. The superintendent was careful to point that out. You're not the person, you're the numbers guy. But I think it would behoove us to, first of all, identify the needs and have some agreement around what those needs are and have that solicited input from the community. Yeah. And then when we go after the money, we don't have an aftershock discussion of what we're spending, why we didn't spend on this, why didn't we consider that? Because that's happened. Yeah. We go back to previous board meetings, that's what happened. There were some concerns about why money wasn't spent here or there. And so I think we go after the need first. We identify the need, and then we look at spending the money. Am I making sense?
Yes, and you're absolutely correct, Dr. Petty. This was just information to say we're doing it. But when we get into the crux of everything, there will be multiple community hearings and multiple meetings with the boards and other stakeholders to put input into the entire plan around going out for a bond, because we have to get approval and seek information and from stakeholders, and so you'll get that whole packet of wealth of information of input from all stakeholders into that process. So you're absolutely correct, and you're just spot on. It's not just we go out, it's just for information to say this is what the plan is, because we found that we can. And so since that we can, one of the pieces is the maintenance
Yes. So we have the master plan.
The master plan,
Yeah.
the maintenance master plan. So it's those things like that that will inform what we need to do. And so not only that, but you'll find as we move forward into the process, how we solicit input from all of the stakeholders.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. And my closing remarks would be that, again, we become comfortable with what would seemingly be difficult conversations. It really isn't, given the path that each one of us chose. We all chose to be here as board members. We chose to be here as superintendents. We chose to be here as CFOs. This is just the dialogue that we have to have, and we need to get comfortable with the dialogue around the work. And as we have the dialogue, we need to move and act with some level of expediency and urgency. There are some things that we can get done that does not take a year and a half to get done. There are some things we can get done and be good community partners, partnering with the different municipalities that surround and support the Normandy School District. Some of these things we can resolve and solve issues with some degree of expediency and a sense of urgency when it really reflects on who we are as a district.
I appreciate that.
If I could, just to clarify my earlier statement about the budget number. See, when I saw the 5 million above revenue, it raised several questions for me. The first question was, did we have the right budget number to begin with? Because if we were 5 million over, did we have the right number? The other question that it raised when you said that we had to go to the fund reserve in order to cover the over expenditure, it spoke to the issue of, do we have the proper checks and balances in place so that we don't get to a 3 million, a 5 million, a 7 million, or other. So that question, it has several pieces to it. So we just need to ask ourselves the question, was the budget, did we have the right budget number to start? If we did, then we have to pay more attention to how we're spending funds and what we're spending them on. And that's the reason why I gave the example of Amazon, because as I look at the expenditures, there's lots of those expenditures, but when we better understand the checks and balances that go together with that, it may be a small fraction, it could be a large fraction, I don't know, but 5 million is 5 million. We just need to understand how that dynamic took place.
Thank you.
Good. I do want to say something to Dr. Petty's comments and also to your comment, Mr. Humphrey, but with this bond referendum that we're looking at, again, we are going through a master plan process where we are identifying all of the needs district-wide and prioritizing those needs. The first meeting begins on June the 5th, by the way. And that captures, we're going to look at it, all the district needs before we even really move forward. In addition to that, this opportunity also allows us to move over or to transfer a portion of what we've had as a debt service levy over to the operating side, which again frees up additional money that can be dedicated toward those things that we've said on the operating side, as we identify some things that we need. So this is a great opportunity. And I'm a believer in, of course, doing our due diligence, but striking when the iron is hot, This is going to, I believe, set our district ahead for the next 20 plus years in a great way. And so, this is looking a gift horse, 2 gift horses in the mouth, I believe, not to take advantage of this great opportunity. But there's more work and like Dr. Triplett mentioned, we're going to provide you all with, we're going to walk through this process together. We are going to do it together. This is going to be a teamwork thing that's going to take our work, our collective work.
Thank you. I don't doubt it. I just think it's important to, in an open forum, state on the record that that's the direction that we're going in.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Petty, for leading into that conversation. It sets me up pretty good for the questions that I had.
You're very welcome.
So I do want to ask first, my first question is, what is our district's minimum wage set at the current?
Currently at $15 an hour.
Okay. And secondly, I do know that DESE had asked the state to do the maximum fund for the SAT, and they came back a little short of that. How will that affect us as our budget is concerned?
We're going to be just fine. So really, that's the state adequacy target that you're referring to, the SAT. That is a calculation where basically, and this is a foundation formula that goes back many years now, back to like 2008, but basically what happened was the state looked at like the top 100 performing school districts, and they looked at, okay, what is the average cost that it takes to educate a child in that district successfully? And that cost came in at roughly about $6,700, or actually it was a little bit less at that time, $6,400. And so what's happening is, actually, if you look at what we are getting, we actually have, it's a little bit over $11,000 behind every child. If you look at our expenditures, we're spending on average, when you look at the teacher's cost, et cetera, we're spending more than $11,000 per child, well over that $6,700 state adequacy target level. So we're going to be fine, even though the state hasn't approved slightly that additional amount, and we've got the money behind our students, so we're going to be fine with that.
Okay. And then my other question is regarding to the elimination of the Head Start funding. Will that affect our early childhood outcomes?
I think it could, but it's not a lot of money, and we will supplement. We will, we've got a great early childhood program, and we'll find a way to supplement any shortfall.
Okay. And my last question is in regards to the comment that you just made about this, the needs assessment that will be happening very soon on June the 5th. Is it possible that the board will have the opportunity to do an evaluation of programs in light of that evaluation of district needs?
So that's
That's two different programs.
It's two different things?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, ma'am. On the
Okay.
evaluation of programs, absolutely, and we'll create that schedule. And once that schedule is created, I'll first meet with President Milton Roberts, and then meet with the board to kind of hash that out, and that'll be a part of the governance calendar as well. With regards to the 5th, I think that's just an initial piece, but there will be several of those kinds of meetings throughout the year before we even put anything out to the public in terms of here's what's definitive and here's what we're going out for, here's why we're going out for it. Even before we put it on the ballot next April, everyone will know exactly what the plan is moving forward. I see Milton Roberts looking at me like that. What I'm saying, Milton Roberts, is that there's an initial meeting to pull stakeholders in to start having conversations around what needs are, what the district needs, what people feel that the district needs, what it looks like, and all of those things. And so that's just one meeting. We'll be scheduling more meetings and more hearing tours to make sure we get stakeholder input into this bond referendum.
Well, if I could, the other piece of that, the June 5th, what that meeting is designed to do is to start the process to look at all of our physical facilities, all of our schools, the Wayside Garden, the property that we have on St. Louis Avenue, and any piece of property that we have. The intent is to bring in the tradespeople, whether or not it's HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and they're going to evaluate all of our systems. We're going to create a master listing of everything we need, and then that list is going to be prioritized. Because a lot of times when you do a facility plan, you end up having to do things on the 1, 3, 5 year, depending on what's on that list. So the intent of that is to put together a comprehensive maintenance schedule, as it were, because this will help Ms. Days in operations to be able to understand how to manage all of the moving pieces of the building. So that piece in and of itself is different than the piece that he's talking about bringing the community in, because that's part of the CSIP process to get the understanding of what the parents actually want to see the district look like as we're building that new CSIP. So I just want to make sure we clarify.
Well, so it does both, because we'll still be going out for stakeholder input for the bond referendum. Yes, we will be doing
Yeah,
that.
Okay,
but you
we're
could
talking
ta-
about two different meetings.
No, but
No.
Now his point is this: once we start to flush out some of the building needs, that becomes part of the conversation that we go to the community with to say we need this bond issue because we found out Bill Noor needs to have a new HVAC system or they need a new roof so some of those become talking points for the what's happening with the community. So yes,
Yeah.
But just to clarify, you're saying that on June 5th, you're having your initial meeting to determine the scope of work for the building and grounds assessment.
This is
no,
going to be the.
no, it's not.
Because I'm getting confused here, because we're talking about
That's
two different
what I'm
things.
trying to clarify
We got
for
two
you.
different things going on here. Okay, so what are we doing?
On June 5th?
Okay.
On June 5th, we're going to start to have preliminary conversations around what tradespeople need to come in to start evaluating properties.
So but that's the buildings and grounds piece.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking, that's what I'm confirming, okay.
You're
So I'm-
correct.
And the reason I'm confirming that is because I think one of the other pieces of that, okay, and I, forgive me, because I do processes a little bit differently than in traditional school. I think one of the pieces to that should be that prior to that meeting, we should give people some type of a document or something that says, give me some information. What do you see? What are the things that you know are wrong? What are the things that you see that we might want to do with this piece of property or this building or whatever it is, so that we don't go and do an assessment without understanding what maybe a vision is for that administration building or whatever it is. I think we need to understand more than just the building.
June
okay?
5th is Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't. I think that's something a little different than this meeting that Mr. Humphrey is talking about. That's something a little different.
Let me add one other thing, and I don't know if I'm on the mic. The other thing is that as we're looking at it, one of the things that districts and businesses are doing right now is when they are doing their building and grounds assessments, is that they're very closely looking at things like how you manage your expenses for water, electric, gas, and so forth. Are those going to be a part of the assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
As an example,
Okay.
at the middle school, when we went from an elementary school to a middle school, there's one of the things I noticed is that you have bigger kids in the rooms,
Yeah.
which means that some of your urinals need to have automatic flush valves.
Right.
Otherwise, you have
Right.
So those are the kinds of things we're going to look at.
Yeah,
It's a very
yeah.
tangible example.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, that was my thing, because I just want to make sure that when we do this building and ground study, that we have all the components in there, so we don't do the whole study and then come back and go, oh, I wish we would have talked about, one of the things we need to make sure we look at in Bell Nor is all the electric and all the computer systems, because we haven't missed that.
This is the plan that Jocelyn talks to us
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
This is what this is.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to cover all of that. Not only that, see, a facilities and grounds, not only does it look at your present facility, you also
The
have
future.
to have a level of forward
That's
thinking.
my point.
Around, because right now we have a property over on St. Louis Avenue
Right.
that's been sitting dormant. We tried to do something with, but as we were talking the other day, when we go through the facility studies, we may find a more tangible use of that property.
Right,
But we
right.
first got to go through the process
Right.
to see what we got, what's on the priority list, and how much can we chew as we come out the gate.
Right.
All right, thank you, Director Humphrey, for the explanation. I appreciate that. The intent of the question, behind the question, was that if we would evaluate programs for the fact of them being implemented in the budget moving forward, if we saw that the programs we would evaluate, would they be necessary to put in the budget moving forward? So that's what the question was about. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'll ask my questions. I guess my first question, huh? Oh, you forgot your question, okay. My questions are really around more of the staffing levels and such in our building. I want to make sure that one of the things that we are doing is, one of the things we said earlier is that we were lean, okay? And so I want to make sure that we are taking in consideration, how we ran the buildings this past year, so we had lots of successes there. What the state recommended that we do, what those differences are, and, to look at, okay, do we need to do less or more or the same, or what is it that we need to do? The reason that I think that's very important is that we really need to make sure that we're positioning all of our building leaders, obviously, to be able to be successful. Another thing that is important to me, and I'm saying it because I didn't see it called out as much as I would have liked on the strengths, is that we have a top-tier early learning center, top 3.
That's true.
And so what I want to understand and what I want to make sure is reflected in our budget is that we're supporting that center, that we're supporting growth of that center, and that we are curing, if we have it, the wait list, because the community, back to Deanna's point, is suffering if we have less than the maximum number of kids that need the services in early learning. So to me, that's like the top priority. You can build all these programs at the high school that you want to, because you get points, that's great. But if you don't have kids to feed it, then you won't maintain those points, okay? So we've got to make sure that we are doing that. That's just something, I just needed to make sure I said that.
Sure.
Also, I wanted to understand a little bit, when you look at the expenditure categories, can you clarify for me again, because I sometimes don't always remember, when you're talking about non-certified staff, who exactly are we speaking of?
Anybody who's not teaching.
Okay, so I guess my question would be also, as part of this process, have we done a full analysis of both our certified staff? Do we have enough? Do we have too much?
So,
As
and
well-
I'll say this.
Let me finish. And also our non-certified staff, because it seems odd to me that they're so close in number, in percent. It seems to me that your teaching staff would be a larger percentage. So go ahead.
It
help me.
wouldn't be, because you have a lot of ancillaries.
Okay.
You have gym, music, and all of the electives that comes with
So
teaching.
gym and music and all those are not included in certified?
Yeah, anybody who's teaching.
Right, okay,
Yeah. And
but
then
they're,
you have your safety officers, your maintenance people.
those are all in non-certified.
Right.
Right, okay.
So that's a pretty large number.
Right, but I guess my question still is, it seems as though they're almost even, okay? And so my question again is, have we looked at the non-certified to make sure that we are on the mark? Because we have guidelines that tell us what we need to do on the certified side. On the non-certified side, that's kind of what we do. Okay, so my question is, have we looked at that? And, not have we should look at that to make sure that that's right on the money. And the same thing I would say also as it relates to supplies and services, because if we want to build a mindset of protecting our assets and ensuring that we have money for teachers and coaches and all those things, then we got to figure out how to have a mindset around how we're spending.
So you ask a question, then you keep going, and I'm like, okay.
Okay, no, go ahead.
So if we're looking at state numbers, and we're looking at number of students we have, and we're looking at the state formula with regards to staffing, we're well above that. Let me say that. We're well above state numbers. And we're above that because we have specific needs. So we cater to some of the needs that we have in the district. When we start staffing maintenance people, it's about square footage of buildings. So a lot of those things play into an equation. So we are staffed a little bit more than the state formula based on student numbers. Student numbers fund districts based on student numbers.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we are well above staff based on student numbers.
But just to be clear, isn't the staff numbers, when you look at the state numbers, and you guys will have to help me, my understanding is that the state numbers tell you the maximum. So for instance, for an assistant principal, let's say you can have 100 people, 100 students. So if you've got 200 students, you have 2 assistant principals. If you have 250 students, okay, do you still have 2 assistant principals, or do you have 300? That's our discretion. The state doesn't say you can't have more.
So it is your discretion.
Okay.
But usually the state figure is above 450 for an assistant
Okay.
principal.
I'm just using that as an example.
And,
Yeah,
and I'm saying that because we've done some creative things because we saw need.
Right.
So we staff our buildings based on needs and not necessarily state formula, because if we use the state formula, we would lose a lot of people.
Yeah, and President Roberts, in particular, where you want to, the discretion that the superintendent is speaking of, you want to look at your early childhood center, because those numbers are always, there's always a smaller student-to-teacher ratio.
Right.
And so that's where we probably would need the additional administrators and things like that, because of that long-standing precedent for early learning.
Right. I guess I'm really looking at it from the standpoint of, if you're telling us that, I mean, we know that we have an academic need, and the state is giving us a formula that says you have this many kids to this ratio or what have you. My question is, if we know that we have a deficit in a particular area, do we continue to do what the state has said is the quote-unquote recommended, or do we do something different because we're being innovative and creative and we're trying to move the kids forward?
We haven't followed the state formula yet.
That's what I'm asking. I mean,
So
I'd like to understand better what we were doing.
So our staffing, and again, we do it based, each building has a different need, and so we
Yeah.
staff it based on what the need. Let's say early childhood center. Every last one of our early childhood centers has a para in it. Every room
Right,
has a para.
right.
So we do
Okay.
things like that helps out in areas.
Right.
So, but if we staff it based on a state formula, we wouldn't have all of that stuff.
I think it'd be good for us to be able to see big picture how each of our schools is staffed. And when I say that, I don't mean just the teachers, I mean the counselors and the social workers and so forth.
You'll get
So
that.
we can really
You'll
get
get
that
that.
understanding,
Yeah.
because I think that's where I'm kind of lost a little
You'll
bit.
get that. You'll get that.
Another component that we also have in St. Louis County, we're part of the special school district, and so we actually have in tandem, we pay into that, of course, but we have a slew of special school district personnel that assist our teachers based on our IEPs, et cetera. So that's another resource that helps us right-size our instruction.
Okay.
And again, some of that is refundable.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Teresa.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Teresa, go ahead.
Go ahead, because I don't want to be cut off when I'm
Okay, go ahead.
talking.
As it relates to the Head Start funding that was pulled, how would this affect this conversation? Because we're having a significant conversation about staffing and what we have going on at the Early Childhood Center, which we know is a great asset for the district. So do you have any examples on how you look to reallocate funds to make sure that we are, the funding is there in case, obviously we're going to lose some funds to support that. So what are the means to reallocate the funds to make sure that we stay the course for the Early Childhood Center?
Yeah, great question, but it's not anything really complicated. I mean, it's a determination of, okay, what is going to really happen? Are we going to lose the funding, for the Head Start program? And if so, a decision needs to just be made, to perhaps reallocate or move monies over. We still want to fund that program. Of course, now we still have to have that discussion with the superintendent and our
Right.
instructional side, and you, the board. But we just have to, it's just a simple decision to, if we are losing funds there, we want this program, we're going to have to just find the money for it.
Dr. Pearson, you have a question?
We speaking on the Early Childhood Center. It's historically known that that's one of the top schools, not only in the district, in the state. People come, because I don't think people really know the depth of the program. It's a 4-day free program to people who live in the district. So other people hear about that, they bring their children there. That's why there's a wait list. They bring their children there, then they take their children out of that program and take them to another school. Plenty of people have done it. So I think that the practices that are at the Early Learning Center can be extended to other schools in the district to maintain it, because the parent involvement is detailed in the Early Learning Center. I had a child to go through the Early Learning Center. Director Davis Day, am I correct? You had children to go through the Early Learning Center. So when it comes to going to elementary school, going to middle school, going to high school, that parent engagement falls. So therefore, if we're gonna do funds for that, it should be allocated to those schools to have programs that keep up the same type of rapport that the Early Learning Center does. But I think we got lost a long time ago. Long time ago. Long time ago.
Lost about,
The
What do you mean
subject
by
at
that? If
hand,
you
the
can-
budget.
Okay, I'm sorry.
okay. I think you-
I did have one other question. It's regarding the staffing and the available funds that we have. I think someone asked the question, the average salary is $15 per hour.
For the hourly,
I'm sorry,
minimum wage.
minimum wage.
the minimum wage.
Referendum exempt.
Okay, so if we know that we're at the end of the school year, we believe that most of our staff is going to be coming back next year. If there are other opportunities where they can go to other districts where they can make more money, can we assure that because we have available funds, is there some kind of way we can't increase?
So when we do the IBB negotiations, although yes, that's for teachers, but we use the same thing for classified staff. So it's everybody else too. So everybody gets a raise. When it comes to
Compatible rate?
trying to be competitive or as competitive, you want to be strategic. Okay, and I'll leave it there on purpose, but you want to be strategic.
Everybody got their questions in?
No.
No.
So what happens in a situation when we are, at the start of the new school year, we are losing staff because they are able to go other places? And I guess I'm asking the question, if we have funds available, are we not able,
You still have to be competitive, though.
and still be competitive? Are we able to give any type of, it's just a question I'm
It's a
asking.
determination. It's a great
because-
question. It's a determination. Let me mention this. Last year, the superintendent actually ended up giving, we crossed this bridge last year. And we ended up, actually, he directed, and we were able to do this. We gave classified personnel an additional like $2 increase on top. Let me also say this, though. The IBB, this was a joint agreement where we worked together in tandem and came up with a solution. One of the positive things about our district is that we were able, not only are we giving raises to returning personnel, but we're retaining our personnel. Neighboring districts are laying off 100, or not bringing back or renewing 100 staff members here, 75 there. We are retaining all of our personnel and giving slight raises that equate to the CPI, to the cost of living. So that's really a victory. And like Dr. Triplett said, being strategic, we are being strategic. We're retaining all of our personnel and giving raises that are comparable with the CPI. That's a good thing. In a year when this is a year of little famine, a little bit for the region,
A little bit turmoil.
And
and uncertainty.
Thank you for that. And the reason that I asked that, because if we look at what's going on in our country as a whole, and we know with everything that's happening, even with everything that Doge did and how they cut, and so just want to make sure that the people are able to survive.
Yeah.
Able to
And
survive.
and I'll add this, Ms. Violet. And the reason I say strategic, and I'm just kind of reflecting off of what Dr. Petty said, when you have a a person who's messed up over here and then go here and mess up there. There's a track record of mess up. It's because they weren't good. They weren't holding themselves accountable to stakeholder monies. And so you have to make yourself, your fiduciary responsibility behind funding has to be solid. So you just can't say, let me throw money at everything, because it's difficult to throw money at everything and not lose somewhere, because there's going to be a loss somewhere if you do that, because it won't be equitable and it won't be fair.
And I'll just end with this, and I know that as a superintendent, it is your job and your responsibility, every employee that works for you, I know that you're monitoring them and making sure that they are doing what they are supposed to do. Just like with any job, you get a raise once a year based on your performance. And if the performance is not, that raise is based on that. I just wanted to ask that question,
And again, you all know this, all of our staff is evaluated.
Yeah.
Every one of our staff members get evaluated. I can, in my 40 years in the game, in different places, that you can't say that with a lot of places. But every individual in our district gets evaluated.
And I just want to make sure that they have enough to survive.
Sure.
Because we are in turbulent times.
Thank you.
Board, any more questions?
Well, I just had a broad comment. You know, we talked a little bit about
some
the
board
academic
comments?
piece, and I know that,
Stop spill.
you know, as we're developing the budget, right now we got about 70% or more of our kids that are in the basic and below category. And so I just need to understand how we're budgeting student support to move kids from those categories to, you know, to begin, because I know that we're showing growth, you know, from a math standpoint, but we need to be able to dig in deep to be able to start moving kids academically, because I know it takes time. They tell you it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to turn a school district. We just need to know how we're turning. So I just need to make sure as we go forward, we have those kind of conversations about what it is we're doing to turn the corner.
Sure. And I want to say this, too, to that comment from Mr. Humphrey. I think either Mr. Humphrey or one of you other board members had this question on tutoring. And just in checking with Dr. McConnell and with our instructional side and confirming today, we actually have tutoring resources for all of our buildings at all grade levels, with the exception we're working with Washington. That's the one exception. But all of our schools and buildings at every grade level have tutoring resources placed there that are there to help mitigate and help our students to improve and hopefully to move more toward proficiency.
And so he won't be as specific, because some of these things, like Mr. Humphrey is saying, those are covered in the resources from the budgeting side are covered in your CSIP plan and your strategic plan. And so understanding what you're saying, he may not have the answer specifically, but the CSIP plan
I'm
will.
just priming the pump so we can have that future conversation.
Yeah, there's just certain things that we've been talking about that we want to make sure are reflected. Tutoring is one that has been very near and dear to everybody that's sitting up here's heart. Before and after care at the Early Learning Center and at our elementary schools, because it does impact our students' parents being able to take them, you know, to and from. Building on our investment that we have made at the high school for, you know, academics as well as for athletics. Because one of the things we also know is that many of our students, if they haven't had an opportunity to get acclimated or acquainted with a sport and to condition and build their body, they can't actually do a sport at high school. We had a lot of students drop out because they weren't in condition and they weren't used to the rigor of doing a sport. So you can't just say, okay, well, at high school you can do a sport. There's got to be, I mean, everything that we do, there's got to be a pipeline to get them there. We've got a brand new golf course that's going in. What's the pipeline? What's the partnership? Okay? And what's the funding? We've got a chess program that we say is top notch. What's the pipeline? What's the funding? We've got kids that we're upset because they, you know, wear hoodies and look crazy to us. So how come we don't have a Normandy hoodie? Okay, just simple conversations like that we need to be having so that the budget is reflective of what our building principals are saying they actually need. The middle school, there's things we need to do there. We're changing it from elementary school to a middle school. But one question that I want to ask, and I'd like an answer to, is where are the dollars for routine maintenance on a regular basis for the various facilities? And where is the plan? At the middle school, we have bigger bodies, but we don't have any space for them to really go outside and play basketball, for instance, okay? We can't wait for 5 years to do that.
Well, they
okay?
don't
So-
do that at the middle school anyway.
Okay.
They got
well,
gym.
They have gym, but they don't have enough, they have big bodies in a little space. That's what
I
I'm saying.
mentioned this when we talked
Yeah.
about switching it
Yeah.
over, but
They have big bodies in a little space. I've been in that building, okay? The
The
gym is small and the outdoor space is for for baseball, okay? And so you're not building physically fit kids and physical fitness and outdoor environments help with the academics. It's all connected.
I think we're all over the place tonight.
No, we're not all over the place at all, 'cause I'm talking about
We
academic.
actually are. I think we're getting.
No, I'm not.
I think we're moving from budget-related budget to everything else but budget. We're getting to strategic planning. We're getting to strategies. We're getting to.
The
I
reason,
think
the
we're
reason
all
that-
over the place.
I don't
and
mean to cut in, but the reason why we're asking the question is because my understanding is that what's happening next is that you all are developing a budget that you're going to bring to us for approval. If we don't share with you what we'd like to see in the budget, then it's going to be kind of hard for us to approve it.
Well,
okay?
you're not going to see that in the budget, is what I'm saying. You're not going to see a basketball extension at the middle school in a budget.
No.
You'll see that in a plan somewhere. You won't see it in the budget, is what I'm saying.
I understand that, but the plan, the budget supports the plan, correct? Is that correct?
As I said earlier.
I guess we just don't have an answer.
As I said earlier, all a budget is the organization's vision in a numerical form. That's all it is.
Exactly.
Nothing more, nothing less. So all of the things we're talking about, in order to make them come to fruition, you have to put some dollars behind it.
Exactly.
That's what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
And so if we make sure that we're having the right conversations and we got $41 million. It's going to go as far as it's going to go. So, something may happen next year. Something may happen the year after that. Something the year after that. But it's important for us to have those kind of conversations so we at least know when we look at the budget that comes forward, whether or not we're setting aside money for tutoring, whether or not we're setting aside additional information around Reading 180 or whatever it is. We just need to know that we have the money in the right places to support the work that the superintendent's doing. So,
Right.
And can I say this also, one last little point to what Dr. Triplett and Ms. Humphrey said, is that a budget, it captures our vision, but guess what? It's a living document.
Right.
It's subject to change. We can revise it. We can amend the budget. So I mentioned that as well.
I appreciate that. Okay. All right.
As
Teresa, did
we
you have a question?
move to adjourn,
Yes, as we move to adjourn, that's got trouble. I'm sitting here going, there's nothing else on here. There's nothing else on here. Okay, everybody's comments have been
Except
put
for
forth,
Dr.
right?
Mine haven't.
Okay, would you
Mine
like to
haven't per
make your comment?
usual. Mine haven't per usual. It is.
well, go ahead and say what you got to say.
If you shut up, I can.
Oh, gee.
Like I'm trying to. We sit here and talk about budget. We sit here and talk about what the kids need, and I think that y'all missed the whole point. The people who, I'll wait till you're done.
I'm done.
I was recently watching News Nation, and what I saw that was alarming, they were reporting that 22 schools in Chicago public schools have 0 children reading at or above grade level. They were reporting that 33 schools in Chicago public schools have 0 students doing math at or above grade level. And so I would add to what Director Humphrey is saying, the budget is a tool for an outcome. Carlton, you've done a masterful job of placing us in great financial standing. That great financial standing while you're the financial person, the superintendent and his larger team become the instructional folks to achieve the outcome so that we don't have numbers like 22 schools with 0 kids at or above grade level in reading, 33 schools with 0 kids at or grade level, at or above grade level in math. So the budget is a tool for the outcome. We need to be clear that the outcome is student achievement.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Director Humphrey?
Amen. Let the church say amen.
Can we get
I would agree.
let's make sure that Director Pearson doesn't have anything else that she wants to add, and then.
What I have to say is, every time I have a comment to say, you two sit here and whisper to each other, pass notes. I'm talking, Mr. Humphrey cuts me off when I simply want to say the same thing that Director Petty said. The amount of disrespect that I get from this board is outrageous. And I try my best to keep the children first, because that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. Y'all missed the point. A lot of the teachers that work in this school district don't do it for the money. Yes, we need our budget on track because we don't want to be like any of our neighboring school districts. They don't do it for the money. They do it for the kids. Can you please not ad-lib while I'm talking? That's all I ask. Because again, the disrespect from this board that come towards me is outrageous. We will have coaches that love our children like they're their own children, but they can't be supported in different aspects. So yes, the budget does need to support those kids. I don't have nothing else to say tonight.
I do.
Go ahead, Deanna.
Good evening again. So I think that everything comes back around. It's not, you can't compartmentalize or isolate a budget when children can't read and write and do math. It has to reflect that we're moving in a direction where our children are not on a path to delinquency. So if we're gonna be $5 million outside of budget, we need some progress. We need something to reflect being outside of that budget. We don't have that right now. We keep comparing ourselves to other districts, but no district academically looks like our district. So as much as these districts are outside of their budget and at a deficit, they still don't look like our district. So the budget has to reflect what we need to see, which is academic progress. It has to. And if we're not doing that, then this is all pointless. Especially $5 million that I'm not gonna say unaccounted for, but that you didn't plan for.
That's not what I think we need clarity on exactly. That, yeah, so the original, the budget that was approved for this year by the board, some who were present last year, built basically a picture of revenue coming in at $62.5 million and expenditures going out at $67.5. So that was the $5 million, that was the budget plan. We're actually doing better than that.
Okay.
So, that's just to correct what you're saying. I appreciate your passion, because you're right on. It is about our students. We want our students to be proficient and successful, leaders and students. We do want that, and that should be captured. And so we're trying to, that's what this process is. We want to provide quality instruction for our children in a quality environment. We want that. So, but I appreciate your passion, and you're right on about what you're saying.
Okay, I'm finished.
Okay. I guess I'm going to have the last word before I adjourn, and that is, one of the things that I want to make sure of is that
everyone that is a member of the board that is in the audience that has anything to do with Normandy Schools Collaborative, that they do feel heard and that they do know that we want to hear what they have to say. I don't want anybody to feel as though they're not being respected. And I don't think that that was the intent of anyone sitting up here.
It's never the intent, but it's always the purpose.
Okay.
President, could I please just interject? Each
We
time.
please just adjourn.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been
Let's
enough
just
said
adjourn.
tonight.
Let's
Let's
just-
just adjourn the meeting
yes.
tonight.
Because I
Yeah.
kept trying to get you
What I would like to do,
acknowledge her.
what I would like to do is to say thank you to Mr. Brooks for all of your hard work and
Thank
for
you.
putting this together. And I look forward to seeing the next phase of this. And I'd like to say thank you to all of the board members that are up here and the superintendent for their attention and their diligence in going through all these pages and pages and all these numbers. I think we all are leaving with a better understanding, and I appreciate that. And one of the things I would also say is that as a board, we're learning and growing. And so hopefully we will be able to work a little bit more efficiently and effectively so that everyone is feeling included. With that, I'd like to see if we can call for the adjournment of the meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and
I move.
And Humphrey and I at the same time, yeah.
it's been moved and properly seconded that we adjourn our meeting for this evening. I'd like to thank everyone for coming and everyone that's online for listening. I'm sorry?
By
Okay,
roll
all in
call
favor,
vote.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All in favor, I'm like lost now.
Aye.
All opposed?